welcome to the Jay and Dre Show. I'm your host Dre, and we have a special guest, Mr. Michael Petty. Unfortunately, my other co-host Jay couldn't make it this week, but it's been a little while, and there's been a lot of things happening, and there's a lot for discussion. Today is December 14th, and first and foremost, I think the most important thing to discuss before we move anywhere else is the FCC's vote on net neutrality.
Huge concern for all citizens of this country. Partisanship besides the point. So Republican, Democrat, Independent, it affects all of us, with the internet being the massive force that it is in forms of communication, entertainment, education. It's one of those things where net neutrality is it's a part of everyone's lives, honestly.
Yeah, I really agree. I kind of hate to go this far with it, but by repealing net neutrality, and all net neutrality is for those who don't know, because there are a lot of people that don't know what it is. Like a lot of the polling reflects that, with who's for it, who's against it, and who just simply doesn't know. All it is simply saying that you can't discriminate against any type of business via, basically can't pay to play. So everybody's equal on the internet. So it doesn't matter from Walmart, it doesn't matter from Joe down the street. On the internet, supposedly my site's gonna load just as fast as Walmart's is. Everybody has equal access to the sites that are on the internet, and on the internet we're free to express ourselves without censorship. With the repeal of net neutrality, what Ajit Pai has done is basically he's allowed for corporate entities to restrict the internet and to allow censorship. And really, I hate to go so far as to say it, but it's the beginnings of fascism. It's the restriction of information. It's the consolidation of who you can get information from. And if you keep in mind that most media outlets are owned by, roll up basically under 6 corporations, it's very easy to control the narrative. So in terms of free speech, in terms of expression, I see this as a big blow to the American people. There's no other way around it.
And it's really hard to see it any other way outside of that. So while net neutrality is populating the airwaves as far as discussions around and what are the pros and what are the cons of the repeal of the Obama-era restrictions put in place, the thing to keep in mind is that everyone uses the internet, every single person. So while a lot of policies and things of that nature from the former president can be debated, you really can't debate the power of the internet and the freedom which is currently in place for every user, just on being an American and being here, to where you can use the internet, browse whatever sites you want to browse, do whatever you want to do on it, encounter the same speeds as everyone else, and then have to pay roughly the same price as everyone else. So that fairness is now up for grabs, so to speak, to the highest bidder. And that's probably the most concerning part, because anything that revolves around, okay, who has the most money, the commoners we lose, the middle class we lose in this case, the lower class we lose in this case. And I think you really hit on a really large point when you said that for a large factor, most things based from entertainment purposes especially are based around less than a dozen companies, you know what I mean? Like these massive conglomerates own everything already. So you look at a company like Viacom, like they own everything. You know what I mean? Like
Viacom, 20th Century Fox, ABC Disney,
yeah.
NBC Universal, CBS, and I'm forgetting the last one, but I know it's there.
Like they already own everything. So to put it, well, not to put in place, but to allow the ISPs to put in place a program that says, hey, for our customers who pay XYZ, we'll fast stream you, for example. Or for companies, ABC, we don't really like you, so we're going to slow down the speeds and access to your networks. It's going to kill everything. And generally speaking, from what you were stating, the difference between being a democracy or even a republic in a sense and being, a fascist state has to do with the dissemination of information, free press. In 2017, all those things are based around the internet. Freedom of expression. You have various social media sites, from your Facebook to your Twitter to your Instagram, as far as ways to get your point across in a mass sense, which is hilarious because our president is a firm advocate of using these things. Like, that's the way he communicates with us as his constituents. He communicates with us largely via Twitter. You don't give a lot of interviews, you know what I mean? There's no real press conferences. You shut all that down. The way that you communicate is via the internet.
Yeah, I really find it ironic. First of all, the argument that Ajit Pai and even Republicans use for being for its removal of the net neutrality is basically that it has to do with broadband and expanding the network to regional rural regions of the country where networks aren't very high speed or may not even be present at all. And the fact of the matter is, net neutrality has nothing to do with that. Like, if companies want to do that, there's nothing the government is doing that stops them right now. It's one of those things where I feel like, especially for those on the right, deregulation is kind of like a trigger word. Not all regulation is bad. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things that probably could be a little bit easier if the government's hands weren't in it the way it is, or if the government wasn't quite taking the approach that they were. But in terms of the internet, you really have to ask yourself, if you want to go to any site right now, what is stopping you? The answer is nothing. But with the repeal of that vote today, say for instance, Comcast, one of the most hated companies in America.
Which they are. Facts.
They're constantly up there. I can see Comcast saying, you know what, I'm going to censor negative press for people using my internet service. Not only that, I can see them very easily being similar to what they did to Netflix back in 2007. A lot of people that are for the repeal of net neutrality say that there was never any reason to have it in the first place, but there was always certain cases that were flaring up that showed the need for it to begin with. And one of those cases, one of the biggest cases, was when Netflix was starting up. Comcast, when it came time for Netflix to negotiate with them, they throttled their data and made their site basically unusable. Netflix is one of the biggest streaming sites on the web. So basically, the ramification of this economically is small businesses are going to get cut out of the marketplace in essence, because right now, a lot of small businesses are able to compete on a somewhat national level because their storefront is accessible by anyone. And I have friends that have a couple small businesses. There's a couple that I frequent. Like, there's some guys that sell vintage video games out of Myrtle Beach. And it may not be big business in the sense that they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit, but I know they make pretty nice money. But I don't think they make enough to be able to pay a premium to, say, make their website load the way that a large conglomerate like, say, GameStop would.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the understated processes that are able to now be put in play, which skews the playing field, and whoever has the most money's favor. So, for example, like me, I'm a news junkie, so I'm constantly on the news, whether it's Fox News, CNN, NBC, Huffington Post, Washington Post, I like the news. But let's say the New York Times, let's use them as an example. So let's say they get on someone's... The failing New York Times. So let's say, for example, they get on someone's wrong side. Now all of a sudden, rather than the general 2 to 3 seconds in which it takes a web page to load on a mobile device, now it takes 12 to 15 seconds to load any web page on New York Times. I'm going to naturally veer away from those sites. regardless of what I want to read from them, I'll instead read it on Fox News. I'll instead read it on CNN. And things of that nature, they really taint the freedom of speech, and they kind of veer it towards those in which we're able to pay to play, so to speak. Because people will naturally veer away from those things just because of the time taken to do that. So in a level playing field, you'll go for whoever has the best article, whoever has views that agree with those of your own, so on and so forth. But when you place undue burden upon sites due to their inability to pay you the premium to have a fast lane or things of that nature, it really distorts the information that's being put out to the public. And this is one of the few items that are currently up in the national debate, which I truly believe is bipartisan, because everyone wants to use the internet the same. You know what I mean? So it's like, cool, let's say I'm a hyper conservative and I just want to stream Fox News all day long. I should be able to do that just as easily if I was a hyper progressive and I wanted to stream MSNBC all day long. And I feel like that's the real issue when it comes to the repeal of our net neutrality laws.
So let me pose this to you. What do you feel? Because it's not quite done yet. Congress could still step in, which is unlikely, but still possible.
Right.
There are still certain things that can be done at a state and local level. So what do you feel is, I guess, the solution to the actions taken with today's vote by the FCC?
The only solution that makes sense to me is Congress actually stepping in, serving as the delegates of the constituents that they have to say that, hey, this doesn't make sense. Let's really reevaluate things. Because very rarely, and I know that this is a Republican-led FCC, but very rarely on any scale politically do you have someone who says, I think it's right to be able to slow down other sites, or I think it's right to be able to throttle information. So that's yet to be a public narrative from either party. So from a bipartisan standpoint, to say that, hey, if we feel like there are changes that need to be made to spur growth and innovation and technology, cool, let's discuss that. But with that being said, by no means will we allow a pay-for-play. And I feel like that's what needs to be done to save things. I liken it very heavily to the Obamacare repeal that's been pushed through on multiple different times as far as the attempts to repeal it. Yeah. If there are things that you don't like about the law, cool, let's discuss those things, like the individual mandate. Yeah, it's a pretty unpopular law, blah, 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 cool. If you don't like that, cool, let's talk about those particular things. But to scrap everything and just, hey, we're just going to start all over, that's absurd to me. You lose all the growth that you've had, all the knowledge that you've learned and gained, and you're just kind of starting over from scratch. And I think that's ludicrous in today's day and age, honestly.
I would completely concur. I would come at it from a bit different angle, because I feel like in today's day and age, in the age of Trump, a lot of people are upset at Trump for the action that his government is taking. But the thing about it that I always tell people you have to keep in mind, a lot of things that Trump's doing out openly and blatantly were already being done behind closed doors. He's just brash enough to do it in public.
He's the voice.
Yeah. He's the bad face of government that's been going on for the last few decades, Democrat, Republican alike. So, with that being said, I don't want to necessarily leave things in Congress's hands, because it's the same Congress that just tried to put forth the Trump care bill that was about 15% national approval, that just passed a national tax bill that was at like 20-some% approval nationally. So it's very apparent that, at least on the federal level, our representatives are bought. And whenever you have bought representation, you have no representation. So I've looked into this, and it's something I've been looking into for a while. I think when it comes to the internet and keeping it as it was for the most part, I think one of the biggest solutions is actually the conservative talking point of competition. And we all know the companies aren't going to compete with themselves. But what a lot of municipalities have done, and especially I can't remember the town, it's in Tennessee, but they've had municipal internet for about 15 years now. And I think the time is really now to treat it as such. The internet is a utility that's vital for commerce, that's vital for education, that's vital to so many sectors of life and even health, that to leave it solely at the whim of a private corporation's discretion that has no representation, no stakeholders other than really their stockholders, I feel is wrong. And I feel that a lot of local governments that have managed their books right and that are in the position to be able to invest in that type of infrastructure should do so, because more often than not, good internet leads to a lot more productive business, higher quality of life, higher quality education. You know, it's one of those things that it's very vital in 21st century life. Like, honestly, you and I, we grew up in times where internet kind of came of age. It was
Right.
a thing in the 80s, but nobody really had the computers, nobody was really connected to it. And I feel like we kind of like that generation that was like pre-internet and then post-internet.
Yeah, I mean, I remember internet coming on little AOL discs in the
Yeah.
mail. Like,
It screamed at you when you try to get on, like the little dial-up call. Yeah.
120 hours of internet here, you know? Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't imagine going back to that. Like, honestly, like, I remember my grandfather used to read newspapers. I'd read along with him. We read like a lot of magazines. We even had TV guides.
Yeah.
I can't imagine going back to that after, having everything literally at your fingertips.
And from that point, I can see that. And I can see that would be really helpful. But I also believe that we would have to kind of hedge our bets in that sense. And if that's the direction that we want to go into, it would have to be done more or less from a federal level. Outside of that, you end up with a hodgepodge of different municipalities, counties, things of that nature. Oh, I have this, but my financials are in the toilet. I can't really afford that. I'm only offering this, or this county has fiber optics, and this county is, still in the Stone Age times. So in that case, then it's really a federal conversation discussion, which we have now. And that's one thing that I really feel like is positive in all this, is at least now we get to spur that conversation, because no one's saying there shouldn't be changes made. I'm not saying that at all. I believe change and growth are as part of being American as anything else. We are always evolving, we're always changing, we're always looking to tweak things for the betterment of our people. And in that sense, we really have to have the conversation, hey, is internet a necessity, and should it be regulated by the federal government in its entirety? So that way you don't have the disparities of, like, hey, I live in Augusta and I'm 15 minutes away from South Carolina. I cross the state border, does everything change? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree. It's not something that on its face is a perfect solution. Like, I really don't feel that there is a perfect solution, at least at this particular point in time. But I do feel that municipalities is one offers accountability, offers transparency, and it's one that the people have a voice in. And it's a debate.
It is.
I mean, it's one that isn't going to get solved overnight, and I really feel that the positive outcome of this is going to be that it might be 10, 20 years from now or whatever, but I really do feel that our networks are going to be better from this, and I don't think it's going to be better because of what happened today, but I think the response to what's happened today is going to make it better, because I can't see people, once they really realize the impact of the power that's been given to these corporations, I can't really see people just taking that line down.
Yeah, and there's an old saying along the lines of you don't really know what you have until it's gone. You know, you really can't appreciate something until you have to turn back the page and revert back to things the way they were, or to experience that discomfort that this is very, very likely to produce. So in that sense, I fervently agree with you. This will be a good thing long-term wise, because this will definitely wake people up, regardless of political party or anything, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans. And that's one of the saddest things about the state of our nation, is sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we put political party over nationalism in a sense. It's like, I'd much rather be a Republican than an American, you know, or I'd rather be seen as a Democrat than an American, which is absurd. But this is one of those few things where it's going to impact us all, like it or not. And just simply speaking, our political parties, as far as our two-party system that we have presently set up, it shares power, you know what I mean? So even though at this point in play, let's say conservatives are in mass control of things, we all know in 8 years from now, it won't be the same, and vice versa. Like, it constantly flips. So instead of us going through a period of insane partisanship that redirects laws and restructures things in a way that only fits their core constituent base, we have to get to a point to where, okay, we can service everyone as Americans fully in totality's sake, and not just our fervent supporter base. And I think that this is one of those few things that will pass that litmus test of bipartisanship ultimately.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face. Tell me that you love me.